Ooh, that's nice. That is nice, and that's a nice way to bring you in to another episode of the Sick As podcast. And that's kind of reminds me of let's just get a kind of reminds me of one of those movies. The lights are dim slightly. This could actually be in your real life as well, and if it is your real life, lucky you. You see someone, not necessarily someone you like, you just see someone. You know, there's just someone in that general vicinity of space, and you're wearing a suit, or you're wearing one of those tuxedos painted onto a t-shirt. And that's always what I've wanted to wear to a wedding, and just seeing how that all plays out. You have a few wines, or a grape juice in a cup that makes it look like you're drinking wine because you want to be bowler. And then you go sit down on the couch and it's too comfy, you feel like going to sleep, so you catch an Uber and you go home. And that's life. That's living. And we are here for another episode. What's going on? I was lucky enough to get another guest. I know I was just talking about having a lot of solos, and then my boy Mitch Kelly, spoiler alert, and I've probably already put this out there, but the man was talking about going into another fight, and the fight was going to be 2 days from the time that we had recorded that episode, and the man's ended up taking another W. So that is 10 fights, 9 wins, and 1 loss. And that 1 loss, we talked about his time in Bahrain. So if you go back and listen to that episode, just the amount of growth that can happen to someone, you know, goes internationally, takes a fight, and then gets beaten. And I think this is still something that most people don't talk about when it comes to fighting. You know, most people don't know shit about boxing, but he's an MMA fighter. And, you know, just the emotional turmoil that he ended up going through, to feel okay with it and to be able to come back stronger. And this is something that we talked about in his first episode, but obviously in his first episode, he hadn't actually experienced the loss yet. So he was kind of on a winning streak. And then in this one, he came back and he was talking about what he had to do to come back from a loss and to get that momentum back, to feel like he is going to be someone who, you know, is in the fight game now. And, you know, just his experience and going through it and just feeling like, you know, I wanted to quit and I don't know if this is my game anymore. You know, that's the sort of stuff. And he suffered a concussion. Like, you get beat up, whereas other things in life, you know, you kind of get hurt, and then it's more your mind that tells you the bad stuff. And that's what we've been talking about on these solo episodes is how do we battle that. But then this one is even more, because you get, you know, you're being displayed in front of a bunch of people, getting beat up, and then you get a concussion, and then, you know, you're away from your family, you can't call anyone because you're in another country. So yeah, just big ups to my boy Mitch. We're going to go get some Turkish food at some point and just have a little deload. I like the way his mind works, and I think he's got a lot of time in terms of meditation when it comes to his fighting. So yeah, big ups to my boy Mitch. Really, really proud of him. Just to see, you know, him put in that work, and to see him take it to the next level for himself, I think it's one of the best things that could have happened to him. And I know just he's not a slacker. I know that he puts a lot of effort into what he does. So yeah, much love to that boy. Show him some love, give him a message, or just go follow him. And I think, you know, over the next couple of years, he's definitely going to take off, and hopefully one day with dreams of making the UFC. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about time. But before we do that, I've got a little poem here for you. Am I really the one that time cares about? I live life like I'm the main character, but I have doubts. Because if I'm really to be of any significance, then I must be a wide-reaching presence in this infinite. Seriously, how could I be anything other than a speck in the cosmos, where one action barely gets a reaction or flare-up at most? And to even be the center of it all, like a good host, then spiraling when you realize that small part you play in the show. The individual was never a concept I grew to know. My sense of self was in relation to people that had seen me grow. My self-worth was conflated with my ability to do my role, and my well-being was reflected on how much of my identity I actually know. So in this vacuum where time is on a continuum, thinking of the impact you could make to a bunch of humans, think less of where you could be in 5 years' time, and start thinking in generations from now. Will your legacy shine? And that is from Mr. Sandman, the Time Man himself, the Time Bandit, some people would call him. The person who, you know, him, her, actually, they, them. What would they call them? You know, someone who just takes grasp of time and controls everything, can speed it up, can slow it down, and I think, when you think about speeding time up and slowing it down, you can think like literally in terms of, if you think about The Sims, you can speed it up when you go to work. Time goes by so that you don't have to watch it all unfold. You make them go to sleep and then they speed up again. But I think a lot of the time itself goes by faster or slower depending on where your mind places anything. Things go slow. They like the old adage, time flies when you're having fun. But yeah, the time is such an interesting thing, and I kind of explore this regularly. But what I wanted to kind of get into today, which we'll get into, and then I'll talk about a few conspiracy theories, is time is just one of those things. Hold the phone. How rude. I haven't even welcomed you. Let's get into it. And now we're here. For real. Timing. It's all perfect. Everything falls in line. Everything that you end up doing is based on time. Time controls nearly everything. But it does now. Has it always been like this? Who knows? Probably not. And I think if we talk about time, we're talking about the concept of time. We're not actually talking about real time in itself, which we'll get to soon. But something that to think about, but I don't really think you take it on too much. But there's this. I remember they were talking about if two people were born at the exact same time, put on a watch, those watches could never go flat, and they just kind of traveled through life. By the time you check them in a couple of years' time, even if they never went flat and there were no mechanical issues, all those possible limitations, those confounding factors, it's not to do with the mechanics of the watch, okay? Don't get caught up on that sort of stuff. But what they're trying to say is that time travels different for every single person who's existing right now. And what they said was that if these two people were born at the same time, were wearing the watch, they'd come back together and then their watches would be slightly out of sync. It could be minutes, it could be seconds. I don't think it's too much, but it is enough to show that we all kind of travel in different dimensions, or we travel in different dimensions of time. I don't quite know the ramifications of that or the implications, but I do think a lot of it has to do with the energy or where you are when it comes to exploring that space and time. We can get into multi-dimensional sort of thinking as well, but just in terms of where we are with thinking about time, that's on a literal sense, but then we need to think now where we are one-to-one. So in terms of how we perceive time and how you subjectively kind of view time or feel time versus how you would be with someone else. And I think contextually you could be in an area and someone's like, oh, that only felt like 30 minutes, and then someone else would be like, whoa, that was like 3 hours. So we know that on a literal sense there's actually probably some sort of time delay between different people, but at the same time, why do I keep saying time? Where your mind is and where you place a lot of your attention will decide whether or not that time is going fast or going slow. Now, what I wanted to talk about today, and this is basically because a lot, we're heading towards the end of the year, and a lot of people are going to start thinking about what to do for next year. And a lot of the conversations have been around, I can't believe it's September already. Time is just flying by. It feels like we haven't done much, but actually, we have done it quite a bit, and it's because a lot of us don't actually reflect. But when people are saying that, a lot of the reasons for that coming up is just because you have this relational kind of seeing your sense of self-worth, or seeing the time going by and not doing much, in quotation marks, not doing much depending on how productive you think you were. And I think that comes down to a lot of people just saying, I didn't even have enough time to be able to do all of this sort of stuff. And this is a thing that they call time famine. So just like anything, you have low resources when it comes to different things, but in terms of having not enough time to be able to do things, this is called time famine. So all of the commitments that I have, I work full-time, I was playing rugby as well, playing Premier Rugby, sorry. I run this podcast, I have, my friend groups, my social life and all that sort of stuff that I have to maintain, as well as feeding myself and showering and training on top of that. It's really easy for me to start thinking that I don't have enough time. And then one of the questions I got asked was, how is it that I maintain that daily schedule, I've maintained that weekly schedule, managed to get all that sort of stuff in and not be stressed too much? And then I started thinking about this even more, and it's going to be counterintuitive. So I'll give away the secret now, and then we'll talk about how you can actually get that. It's counterintuitive because I actually give myself a lot of time. I plan time for me to do nothing. I plan time for me to do the things that I love. Like I kind of prioritize that. I know that work time is going to be these sorts of, like these times, this is what I'm going to be doing, but what is it that I can be doing for myself outside? And that's something that was such a novel concept for a lot of people. But yeah, I try to take time, and whether it be, during some other activities as well, we'll get there in a little bit. But just like I've said with all the other feelings that we've had, there's a literal objective sense of time, right? So you could have not enough time at all. You could write it all down in your diary and you're like, oh my gosh, there's not much time at all. I've got all this, I've got this, I've got this. And you find actually people love talking about how busy they are and they love going through it. And I'd just be like, really? Are you that busy if I see you on your phone that much? Or so I think how we actually fill that time. So it's a subjective thing. I think subjectively we feel like we are way more busy than we ever were, and that we don't have as much time. Objectively, though, apparently, because of all the technology that's actually here, there was a study on this, and they kind of looked at how much free time people actually had in a day in terms of pockets of time, and then putting that all together, we actually objectively have more time in a day than we ever have in any other time, like period of time through our lifespans, but also through generations and decades. So that's the first thing, is just to know that yes, there is more time. We have more time, and I guess it's how we're starting to feel that, but also how we are perceiving that sort of time. That is what's kind of getting us into trouble when we start to think about it. So because we start to feel like we don't have enough time, so this is, I'm talking about stress, I'm talking about being able to, I'm talking about negative emotions. I always like to talk about these sorts of things. Your time, the amount of time that you have, and this is just a clear example of all of this sort of stuff. If you start stressing out, you start being stressed, because you subjectively have not enough time to be able to do stuff. And then because you are stressed, you start partaking in behaviors that don't actually add towards the productivity of whatever it is you were trying to do. I get it often where people come up to me, I just don't have enough time. Actually, people love calling me and telling me about their problems. And no one ever asks me how I'm doing, but people like unloading on me. And a lot of the times that I do hear it, I don't really tolerate it anymore. But I remember it was always like, I'm just so stressed, I've got all of this. And no one was ever like, how are you so chill all the time? It was always just like, oh my gosh, I have to do this, I have to do that. And I'm just like, oh yeah, okay, that sucks. And then they're just like, you're so chill. Oh my gosh, like you're not as busy as me. It was never that I wasn't as busy as anyone else. Sorry, I just got a PhD and stuff. But like it's just how I perceived it, how I gave myself grace to be able to take some time to not feel so stressed and to do activities that actually put me in a better state to be productive. So what I'm trying to say here is that people spend more time being stressed about different things and actually counting up the amount of time that they have to be busy, rather than finding the pockets of time where they can do things for themselves that makes them feel less stressed. Now, I know when I do talk about this, it starts to feel like, okay, well, you're just doing this so that you can become more productive. And then, yes, we are feeding into capitalism overall. But what I'm trying to do is get to a place where, if you're fulfilling your obligations with work, if you're also fulfilling your obligations with the stuff that you need to do at home, but you're also feeling just like overall subjectively a lot better, then isn't that a positive outcome? Like, obviously we'd like to dismantle the system that is put in place and that makes you have to feel that sort of way. But if we can just thrive the best that we can despite the system, then that's also a very, very good win until we get a new queen bee. Right. So the biggest thing that causes a lot of people thinking that we don't have as much time is that we have this thing called time confetti. If you think about confetti be the thing that comes out and it's like sparkly, glistens everywhere. Bam, all over you. Nightmare to try to get out of the carpet. But anyway, there, confetti, nonetheless. It's everywhere. That stuff is sprinkled. That's just like when we have a bunch of tasks that we need to do. The introduction of the phone, the introduction of emails, the introduction of pretty much anything that can take your mind away from a solid chunk of time being on something. That's called time confetti. That's the stuff where you have no deep work, where you're basically just scratching the surface with how much attention that you are giving stuff. Because your mind never actually gets into any deep state of thinking or a deep state of any actual work that you're going to be doing, it feels like you don't have much time, or it feels like you don't actually get much done, because you don't really get much done. You're jumping from task to task, and you're not feeling like you're actually achieving much in that time. A lot of this has to do, like, you have more sporadic places of your attention being placed, and because there's a whole distraction of a bunch of efforts on a bunch of different things,
it's not feeling like you're doing much, and that's going to also add to that stress because you're going to like, I have so much to do. And sometimes it's not even that you have so much to do, it's just that you didn't really put too much effort into whatever it is that you wanted to do. So big easy one is put your phone down, and I probably should do an entire episode of how to break up with your phone. I'm not the best at it. It's something that I need to be better at, and I did notice, like a while ago when I would barely use my phone, Tyler and I actually talked about this, and maybe I'd be on my phone like an hour a day, like not that much at all, and now it's probably creeping up quite a bit. But anyway, time confetti. That is if you think about your day and if you think about how much time you feel like you don't have, look at how many times you switch tasks in like a certain amount of time. Another thing that you can do is, start to highlight just how much time you do have or how much time you don't have by having a planner. Go through your day and write down hour to hour what exactly you did. Even half an hour to half an hour. What exactly did you do in that sort of time? And you can either find that there are pockets of time, there are times where you're excessively productive. Yeah, that's cool. But are you actually productive? And in the amounts of times that you're actually doing things, how much of it is actually productive time? So have a look at that as well. I think we need to always have some sort of baseline of where we're at, because if we're thinking we're stressed because we do not have enough time, then we should probably go and survey where it is that we can make up for some of that time as well. Using one planner, I find this is like actually a productivity tip. It's a productivity tip is, I think, just having one planner. I remember I had notes where I have, some appointments in there. I'd have one calendar, then I had my Google Calendar, then I had my laptop, and I had all of my notes just kind of everywhere in terms of what my calendar was. But having it in one central spot, it helps you stop using like multiple technologies that you don't have to use, then getting distracted, and it's got it all there. And I think that what I like about the calendar of other people putting stuff in is that they can book stuff for me as well. And then another thing is that you can block stuff out if you need to. If you need to have time for yourself, you can also say, I'm in a hooey, sorry. Yeah, so that's a way to stay on top of it all, is just using one planner, and in that planner being aware of how much time you're actually going to give yourself, how much time you're going to give yourself for other things, because I do feel like a lot of the time famine that we feel like we have is because we're fulfilling other people's roles, we're fulfilling other people's responsibilities, and I think half of the time famine is because we're doing things that we don't believe in, or we know is kind of fueling someone else's dreams, and then it starts to come with a little bit of resentment. So maybe, yes, you do have quite a bit of time, but you are working productively on one thing, but it might not be the right thing that you want to be working on. And that can add to the resentment, then make you feel like you don't have enough time, because you do have enough time, but you don't have enough time to do the things that it is that you actually love. Now, this is all coming in. If we think about how time flies, I think it all comes into how we actually have this responsiveness to our own sense of time. And I've been thinking about this more about being in the present, and thinking about those watches at the beginning, and that, when it's, okay, should I use weight loss? Weight loss was a really, really interesting thing, because how day to day you don't notice anything changing until you step on the scale and you realize, oh my gosh, it's such a huge change. You don't notice changes in yourself day to day. So kind of feels like the days just go by. And then it's not until you look back like 10, 20, 40 days that you notice, physically things have changed. That's as if it's coming to training and stuff like that. But day to day, you don't actually notice. And I think a lot of the time it's because we're not actually present in where we are most of the time. We're not really taking into consideration, the types of things that are happening every day. So upon reflection, when we feel like we don't have enough time and time's actually flowing really fast, if you write it all down and you actually look at all the types of things you're doing, you notice, oh, damn, I've actually done quite a bit in this time. And that's where a lot of the stress comes from. A lot of the stress comes from the fear of not being productive enough. And that's fair enough, because that's kind of ingrained in us, because we know that we need to be productive so that we're actually feeling like we're contributing to society. We get a lot of our self-worth from that, and that's just because you didn't want to be excommunicated if you were seeing it as useless for a bunch of people. But this is now kind of replaced with having to go to work and your work colleagues needing to be productive for them. Now, something that we should do more of is idling, and this is something that I've been doing a little bit more, and it's just knowing that in the times of being dormant and giving yourself time, whether that's listening to music, going for a walk, and just even having a nap. If you get the chance to be able to have a nap, doing things for yourself. And it's going to sound like, I say this all the time, it's going to sound like it goes against productivity. But what you don't know is that by going for that little bit of a walk, by, going and having a nice meal and actually being present with yourself, being present with a friend, and having those and not feeling guilty for taking that time out, you're actually going to come back and be a lot more productive. Now, you're using time to do nothing. Well, not nothing, but you're using time to do the things that you like. But it's the mindset that you have going into it, which is going to determine whether or not this is something that either takes away stress or adds to your stress. If you give yourself the grace to be able to go and do it and have that compassion to yourself to know that this is going to bring you into a better headspace to actually be productive, then you will be productive. And I think more bosses are starting to notice this, and they're giving people the opportunity, to get up and be active or go into a green space where they can actually refuel themselves and recharge that energy as well. You feel dormant, and this is something that I've really had to deal with recently, is just, it may look like I'm not doing too much. I might be reading, I might be coming up with new ideas, big idea stuff, but once you've kind of put all that stuff together and you're in this, you shift that energy into going into productive mode, it all comes to you out of nowhere. It's hard to see it when it's happening because you're not doing anything that has a tangible outcome. You're not writing a whole bunch. You're just kind of reading, taking in information, forming ideas, and being able to see how your ideas are going to be shaped. But because nothing's going on the page, it's really difficult to see how much you're actually just doing. And then when you shift that energy, you may have felt like you were dormant for a long time, but stuff is ticking. The volcano or the lava inside is still bubbling. It's boiling. It's ready to come out. And then when it is ready to come out, it just causes mass destruction. And that's a volcano, but I'm talking about you. Not necessarily a mess and not going out and breaking a whole bunch of things, but you know what I mean. You have that same energy. You have that activity that comes out of you. So time is a tyrant. I will say that. We become slaves to time because time dictates everything that we do. This comes out at a particular time. We don't have enough time. I can't do this, or like this is the time that this is going to happen. And then when we're feeling like we're running low on time, that's when a lot of stress starts to happen. We're slaves to the clock, and we're unable to live a life and be present. I feel like because we're always chasing something. We're always chasing something to be done by a particular time, or we're feeling like we've wasted a whole bunch of time. So we stress living in the past, or we get anxiety thinking about the future. So it just reminds me like medieval times, and this is something that now that we have technology, we have a lot more access to, not actually having anything to do with time, like not actually thinking about seasons or seasons changing because of climate change, but also the amount of times that we can actually be productive. Because of the Industrial Revolution, we can actually work 24 hours around the clock. We've got lights now. We've got machinery that continue to work. We have shift workers who can come in and continue that factory chain. This is capitalism at its finest, and that is why we have become so out of touch with who it is that we are, and probably the types of things that make us happy and feel like humans is that sort of stuff that the Industrial Revolution or capitalism in general kind of just takes away, because we need to be producing as maximal as possible. That's the theory. And the bullshit jobs, if you think about like 9 to 5, and if you think about how we work, I think this is really what illuminated it. We had COVID, right? We had a lockdown. Everyone went home, started working when they could, like not necessarily the 9 to 5, but a couple of hours here and there, just when it worked for them, some stretching on the ground, going for walks whenever. A lot of people, I know we were locked away, and I know there's going to be controversial evidence, and there's going to be, conflicting evidence on this as well. But I think on the whole, a lot of people realize that you don't actually need to be in an office from 9 to 5 to be as productive as possible. There are a lot of people who are just producing way more, and that should have been signs to us that more people can be remote and that you don't need micromanager bosses. But I digress. What I was trying to say is that in this, we can find the times that work best for us, for you to be as productive as possible. The productivity or the outcome should be all that we focus on. It shouldn't be the amount of time that you're putting on when you're there. It depends on the type of job you have, obviously, because some of the times, you have to keep doing your job. Like if you have a physical manual labor job, or something where like you have to be there doing something because you're part of a chain. But in a lot of the other ones where, you're doing research, for example, like what I do, if you don't have to be there and you're still producing the papers, you're still meeting the KPIs, if you're doing all of that stuff, why do you actually have to be in the office? But anyway, what I'm trying to say is a lot of this is they're not really. So capitalism is all about maximizing the amount of output you can get for the least amount of cost. The only thing is it kind of rewards inefficiency, because in some jobs, if you can get the job done in 3 hours, and then you go home early, you're not paid anymore. But it's kind of like, okay, you're there at 9, then you leave at 5. The bells go, brrr, we're starting at 9, brrr, finish at 5. And that was kind of like, I think, because of the Industrial Revolution and thinking about factory workers. But in a lot of the other jobs where that's not actually necessary, what are you going to do? Just sit there and pretty much get paid to be in a spot just cause. I don't know if this is founded in too much fact, but I just wanted to tell you that we should probably start thinking about that as well. So, oh, yeah. And this is something just to be like, it's so engraved in us that what we think to live a happy life, these are the best things that we actually need, is that they polled a bunch of people and they asked them, would you rather this job which pays this amount of money but you get this amount of leave? And then there was one which was like high pay, low leave. And then there was the other one which was like medium pay, a lot of leave, and you can go on holiday with all that sort of stuff. People still would prefer the top one. People still would prefer the first one, and saying that it's pay over time. But what we don't know is that the less time we actually have, and what we don't really consider often, is that the amount of time that we have for ourselves, the lower that is, the less happy we actually are. So it's weird that we've conflated all these different ideas in terms of, financial, achieving a certain amount of money as actually being the thing that's going to bring you the happiness, when actually being able to have quality time with yourself and with people that you care about is probably going to be a little bit more important as well. So I have a few things that we can do to kind of like help with fighting this time poverty. And I think you'll see that, maybe I am quite a productive person. You just think I'm someone who can just get it all going. But the thing is, I have a lot of time to myself. I do spend a lot of my time, I do kind of deliberately put out time for myself. And I know some of you are going to find that a little bit more hard to be able to do. That's fine. But my favorite thing is just to enjoy that time that you have. If you give yourself half an hour to do nothing and don't feel guilty about it. Don't feel like you have to make it up somewhere else and be extra productive. Just feel like, okay, this is my time for myself to move me out of this phase, or to shift between two tasks, or to go back and actually feel refreshed to be able to go and do it. And by the time you're doing it, you'll actually feel like you're a different person, and that you're bringing a different energy into it, rather than just slugging around that old bun that I used to have. Find times during the day that you can gift yourself. Like I said before, I enjoy flying. I enjoy commutes, because that is time that I can definitely not be doing anything else. I try, I walk, I park about half an hour away from my work, and I do that so that I have that start and finish of the day to be able to walk. And then that ends up being 40 minutes to an hour of just walking, because I've given myself that time. I take my lunch break. So what I'm very intentional on, and it's heartbreaking when I see it, but I have a chair that's next to my desk, and will watch something, or I'll just eat and not be at my desk, not looking at my computer, not doing that work, because I do notice that I can easily just have food there and not mindfully eat my food, and it'll be done, and I'll still be working in that time, and I don't really actually take that break. So that's something that I've been trying to do a little bit more. I walk into work. Also, if you can, outsource stuff. They actually find that there's a greatest relationship with satisfaction with being able to do stuff that you actually enjoy. If there is something that you can outsource, or find someone else who actually loves the job, that's the key thing. You got to give it to someone who's willing to do it and actually loves it, and you then both start living fulfilling lives, because you're doing the things that you enjoy, but you're not doing the things that you don't enjoy, that you stress out about, because then you're going to be taking up a lot of your time trying to learn a skill that you don't necessarily like, and then you're subjecting yourself to that as well. And another thing that I've been a bit more deliberate about is, going out and buying dinner for myself. Yeah. And spending that time thinking, or spending that time by myself, reflecting on how the day's gone, and actually having that time to myself to realize, like, are things going well? Are things not going so well? So I've given myself that grace as well. And I think, just giving yourself, just being okay with it. So that's I think the key things to take away from this is just to be aware of where your time is going. Be aware of how you perceive time. Does it stress you out? If it does, start looking at types of things that you can kind of get rid of. Because, yeah, like I said all the time, one of the biggest drivers of people not changing their behaviors is that they feel like they don't have enough time. Subjectively, yes, it may feel like you're stressed, but objectively, humans have the most amount of valuable time. The most amount of free time we have ever had in our entire lives. So that's something to keep in mind. And here is your motivation for your Monday. You touch something hot. It burns. Ow, yucks. Now you've got a reminder of why you don't touch the hot thing, but you also have data to say that you can actually get through it. I think we need to test ourselves a little bit more. We need to go through different moments in our lives that remind us that we are human, but we are also capable of pushing ourselves through most things that we ever wanted to do. I don't think we test ourselves enough. I don't think we have the self-efficacy to even believe that we can get through this. The more things that we do, the more data we can gather to show ourselves that we are capable, the more likely we are to step into that new realm. Have you ever played Grand Theft Auto? There's this time when you're exploring different parts of the map. You're not actually sure of what's out there until you get that greater perspective. How do you get that perspective? You have to keep driving to the edges of the map and you start to see it expand, and your world gets brighter and wider and more accessible with other stuff that's happening, and you might even find a parachute. That has nothing to do with this, but you always have something to do with this, because that parachute is what is going to get you out of here safely. Be quiet, please. Have a lovely weekend. Have a lovely week. Love you all. Bye.